Hello everyone, on today's second video. I hope you didn't forget to watch the first video before proceeding to the second. Thanks for your support. Let's get started. Story 1 from user deleted. That my grandmother had a child before she married my grandfather. When my grandparents met and started dating, my grandma was only 13. My grandpa was 20. They married when she was 17 and he was 24, right after he came back from serving in WW2. That was about as much of the story as anyone in my family ever knew. They'd been dating, then he went overseas, and she wrote to him while he was gone. When he got back, they got married. A few years after my grandma died, my grandfather suddenly mentioned that they'd actually been broken up for a while before she started writing to him. After they'd dated about a year, he went to pick her up at her house one day, only to find she wasn't home. Her parents informed him that she'd left to live with some cousins a few hours away, and she'd be gone for about a year. He got upset that she hadn't told him about this in advance and ended the relationship. When another year-ish had passed and she returned home to her parents, she started writing him overseas and apologized, and they started dating again. My grandpa told this story very blandly and seemed to believe that the situation was what it said on the tin. But of course, in the 1940s-60s, it was quite common for teenage girls to go live with relatives for a year as a code for having an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. My grandpa would never have admitted if they'd been having sleep, but I'm betting they were. She got pregnant, and she was sent off somewhere to have the baby. I've done commercial DNA testing, so I'm on the lookout for someone to turn up as a sibling match to my mom someday. The only other explanation for my grandma suddenly leaving town would be if her parents didn't approve her relationship with my grandpa. But from everything I know of them, they were perfectly fine with their 13-year-old daughter dating a guy in his 20s. Story 2 from user Alien Blooded. That my oldest brother is actually my bio father. It just makes no sense to me otherwise. I have a butt chin, and no one else in my family does. This older brother is an alcoholic, drug addict, and just a big mess all around. He brought different women to my parents' house every day, and we would hear them. It makes no sense to me that he came out of that with 0 children. Makes less sense since he's 20 years older than me, which means my parents would have had me at a dangerously, for my mom, old age. I know it's not impossible, but it just makes a lot more sense this way. Plus, my parents always covered up for his wrongdoings, so it honestly wouldn't surprise me. I once asked my mom, and she got visibility upset. Didn't even ask her outright, I just said I had a dream that they told me my brother was really my father. She got super mad, and refused to even discuss or acknowledge my dream. Weird as hell. I would still consider my mom, my mom. Wouldn't consider my brother my dad if he were, because he's in trash. It's just something I think is highly probable. Edit. Didn't expect this to get any traction. Some clarifications. I didn't mean to imply I'm a product of incest, mom plus brother. I meant I wouldn't know who my bio mom is in the case this is true. My mom knew this when I brought up the dream. She didn't think I meant she slept with my brother, for God's sake. The DNA test thing is currently hard for me. Those websites that upload that info so you can get your genetic tree aren't popular where I live. I'm from a third world country and currently too broke to do any tests. Also, I don't care too much. It wouldn't really make any difference. My father, Grandpa, is an absolute trash, and so is my brother. And I talk to neither of them, so it really doesn't matter. It's simply something I figured some time ago that I found funny. Also, definitely not adopted. I'm an exact copy of this brother minus the butt chin. And I have no relatives to ask since, due to the fact that my father is in trash, my whole nuclear family is estranged from the rest. So only my parents and other brother would know, but I'm not gonna ask. I believe it would bring them distress, and it's honestly not important enough to cause that to them. TLDR, not adopted, and don't quite care about who my bio parents are. Edit 2. Birth certificate is irrelevant. Back when I was born, again, take in mind I'm from a third world country, you could put whatever in a birth certificate and it would fly. So mine says my parents are my bio parents, but due to the context, it means nearly nothing. Edit 3. Okay, the medical background being important is a very good point. Sadly, I'm currently a very broke college student, so it would have to wait some years until I graduate and get a job that allows me to have spare money for that sort of thing. Story 3 from user Zora Aros. That my uncle mostly likely murdered my grandfather. Backstory: my grandfather died when my mom was 6. She was the second youngest of 9 kids. My grandfather was an alcoholic and super abusive to my grandma. The older 4 or 5 kids knew this and were left to take care of things when he'd trash up. They hated him. The younger 4 kids, my mom included, only have fond memories of their dad, BC. They were all less than 10 yo. Anyways, I always knew he frowned, but only recently did I find out that he went out fishing one day. This is rural Labrador, mind you, with my uncle, who was 3rd oldest, probably about 15 at the time. My uncle came home that night without him, soaking wet, and wouldn't tell anybody what happened. He still has never told anyone what happened that day and barely speaks. He's always been a bit odd, quiet. My oldest aunt, the oldest of 9, the most outspoken against my grandfather, won't speak of it either, and the 2 of them are really close. There's 32 plus of us in terms of cousins, and we all know different pieces of the story. Happy ending. My grandmother was single for the next 50 years of her life, but when she was 87, she moved into an assisted living home and found a man and started dating, and turns out he was her high school sweetheart, and they last were together when she was 17, so exactly 70 years earlier. He wrote her poems, and he played the accordion for her, and she danced. They were together for 9 years until she died at 96 on Feb 6, 2014. He died Feb 7, 2015. He was totally fine until the anniversary of her death and declined suddenly and rapidly. I swear none of this is a lie. It was in the local news actually, the part about my grandmother finding her high school sweetheart. Story 4 from usernames Not Rudiger. There's a conspiracy within the Canadian federal government to provide employment and contracts to French-speaking people as their way of keeping their own power and significance for French people in the country. You must have thorough fluency in French, with extremely rigid and overtly difficult testing for English natives to pass, and prove they have strong enough command over a secondary French language in order to get even technical roles, little on management, which makes higher paying positions and million-dollar contracts outside the reach of English-speaking people. Our IT infrastructure is falling apart. There are long delays and terribly implemented websites and applications. But the people involved who built it all speak French, and that seems to be the main metric that matters when hiring or filling roles. It's trash because it harms low-income Canadians who need government services the most, and they have to use overly obfuscated systems, which often leads old or sick people to give up on receiving assistance. This is all a plot by the French to keep English-speaking Canadians poor and out of the government. And the worse the government systems are for paying out to Canadians, the better, because that's one less person being paid from the coffers, even if it's money they deserve. French people lost the 7-year war against the English, and so have kicked and screamed, wasted billions of tax dollars, and continue to manipulate the government to favor policies that only benefit them. Meanwhile, Quebec is the most racist place in Canada. French Quebecers are some of the most overtly racist people I've seen in Canada. Selfishness and bitter resentment to all things non-francophone is extremely prevalent. Story 5 from user deleted. I also suspect the whole Popeyes chicken craze was only to distract the fact our Amazon rainforest are in fire. This is our nature and supply of oxygen that's at stake here, but look at us going insane for GMO sandwiches. Popeyes made $22 million off of that sandwich in a week. About the same amount of acres that been destroyed by the fire. The other day I went to Popeyes to order the sandwich just to check it out, and the manager was outside telling people they were closing down because they ran out of everything. It was 5 p.m. They had nothing. I couldn't believe that we are so unwise to follow a trend that we completely forget what's actually happening, that's literally putting our lives at risks. The fact that not only that they ran out of the sandwich, they ran out of everything too, which shows me that people like me who drove 15 minutes to their closest Popeyes specifically went to just try out that sandwich, but was told they had none left that. They had no choice but to order something else. I thought he was going to tell me they had no more sandwiches since I did that whole drive. I was hungry, so I didn't mind to ordering something else, but even that they had nothing, which proves that other people had the same mindset. It was a great amount of people who was curious like me who drove all the way to the nearest Popeyes just to be told they had nothing left. If that isn't a genius marketing scheme for Popeyes to bring up those sales, then I don't know what is. We're so quick to go crazy over some Instagram meme and give up a few dollars for. But if you get every unwise person to jump on the bandwagon, you're gonna make $22 million in 1 week. Not even to something to save our Amazon rainforest, which provides us the most important part of living. And not only that, those poor animals and the ecosystem is completely destroyed. What kind of living creatures like us could ruin their own planet along with innocent creatures? Story 6 from user deleted. That my father is, or has close buddies who are, government officials. My father was abusive to both me and mom, but me worse. Anytime I told an adult like teacher or social worker, they would always phone him, and rather than question, "So, what have you been doing to your son?" Or, "Your son is terrified of coming home. Could you perhaps explain why that is?" Etc. Instead, they all went, "Your son said you were abusing him. Like, I don't understand. Like, what does that mean? Why would he make up such a horrible word about you? What the trash do you mean?" And every person did it. Every time. Also, after I fled to and lived with my mother, the few times we did go to court, I never got a chance to explain my abuse my side, because the judge always said either, "I'm not interested in that," or, "We don't have time to talk about it." Yet, every time he was always willing to rip into mom about her being with an alcoholic boyfriend and their small domestic problems and blah blah blah. So why is it anything said about dad he doesn't want to hear? And the few times the court gave him orders, he openly, actively refused to. He never did any orders the courts did, but nobody at the court would ever say anything about it. They just acted like the orders never existed. Also, the court said that, since this year I am 18, mom can't get to have dad pay her child support anymore. Not like he was in the first place anyway. And in fact, neither he or her need to even associate with me because I'm 18, an adult. Yet he is perfectly fine in allowing dad to search for where me and mother are living for some damn reason, including sending a package via the Supreme Court to try to find our address. So why is it everyone is so quick to jump on mom, but anything about dad, they're all so quick to just, "Hey, I don't want to hear it," sweep under the rug and act like it doesn't exist? He can openly disobey court orders. The courts don't even want to hear anything bad about him, and everyone acts like abuse is a made-up word when he is mentioned. There is no way he could be this sheltered unless he is somehow a Gov official or has very close buddies in the Gov somewhere, somehow. In fact, we have records of him leaving a phone call at mom's old workplace saying he's coming up there to beat the trash out of her. And he showed up, mom fled out of there, he madman drove after her. At the apartment, she slapped him in a "get away from me" way after he threw her against a wall. Cop came, apprehended mom, and drunk a drink with dad. I honestly have no other explanation other than he must be censored off the Gov's back or have close buddies who do. Story 7 from user ADM86. That most pro PC gamers and famous Twitch streamers use cheats, hacks, some even have specialized or personalized ones. That the gaming companies are more permissive with cheaters as they let people on, because hey, they receive a big income from that market, and the rest it's too naive to know when a cheater it's using auto-aim or no recoil hacks. I see the gaming market right now as something like a Lance Armstrong type of situation before the shit hit the fan. Sadly, I don't see the situation close or ever to being uncovered because of many reasons, like most gamers being too naive to identify the cheaters, and the affinity to worship them. Besides, companies like Twitch benefit too much from it. Thanks to everyone who was here today. See you tomorrow. Love you all. Bye-bye.